Come on, come on. Welcome to the special edition of 365 Draft. This is Kyle Krabs, Director of Scouting at NET Scout. I am joined, as always, by my right-hand man, Mr. Joe Marino. Joe, welcome to Mobile, buddy.
Welcome to Mobile, indeed. It's been an awesome time down here, getting to see these prospects in person and talk football with anyone and everyone who's anything in football. So this has been a real treat.
Yeah, it's really surreal when you're standing along the sidelines at practice and you look in front of you and there's these players that you've been evaluating all year. You look to your left and it's Nick Saban. You look behind you and it's Dan Marino. And you look to your right and it's Bryan Perez from Draftbreakdown.com. So that's some good company to be in. And, you know, I really thought I'd put Bryan up on a nice little pedestal because we are actually joined by Bryan Perez. We have two special guests for this on 365 Draft. So, Bryan, I'm going to give you the floor first. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Kyle, Joe. It's a pleasure to be joining you guys on your show, but I'm a little insulted that you compared me to a quarterback that never won a Super Bowl. Ooh, that's a little hurtful.
Shots fired.
That's a little hurtful, Kyle.
And that's Waldorf voice you heard in the background is our second guest from Bleacher Report, draft analyst Luke Easterling. Luke's a good friend of mine. I've met him before today, so any insults or barbs that are traded back and forth, we know are done for the most part in good nature. So
For the most part.
yeah,
I'll have some ones that are meant to hurt your feelings.
okay, only just a couple. Yeah,
Just a few.
Yeah. Okay. So Luke, second year, you and Bryan came down last year to Mobile. What is the experience like for somebody who's not here for the first time and just kind of in awe of the grandiose atmosphere?
Yeah, it really is such a unique place to be, and you mentioned because of just the access that you have and the fact that I give Phil Savage, the executive director, a lot of credit. He has done everything he can to maximize the visibility of this event and to give really anybody who wants to be a part of this and be serious about coming here and experiencing it the opportunity to do that. And I feel like it's a very, very unique place to be in that you have all of the decision makers and the team personnel around. You have anybody who's anybody in the media who's here as well, but also the locals and the fans who are able to come and be involved as well. It's just, again, it's such a unique. You have the coaching staffs and everybody. It's such a cool place to be around and have that access and just be close to those people and have some great conversations and just get a lot of different opinions and again, all around, it's just a great experience, very unique one that I definitely recommend to anybody who wants to understand the process and just immerse yourself in it in a way that's very rare.
Yeah, and I think immersing yourself in the process, this is for my first time here. You can watch the highlights of the Senior Bowl, or now that ESPN is broadcasting the practices, you can watch the practices, but when you're here and you see how everyone who's involved in this, this evaluation timeline and calendar, how they react to players and how, somebody walks up on stage and heads turn and those whispers and murmurs, you hear them, and the people take notice, and to be able to see all of that and just how the process actually works on the inner workings from the inside, the people that are doing the things you'll like to sit here and talk about on the outside. It's just really cool. Joe, what has stood out to you your first time down here thus far, from Monday when we got here after our joyous little road trip down from Charlotte all the way through till tonight?
I think without getting into the players, the thing that stood out to me most is just how cordial and welcoming everyone has been. You can get down here and be very intimidated by the amount of NFL presence. You look to your left and you see Todd Bowles. You look to your right and Chuck Pagano sitting there. Mike Tomlin's 20 feet in front of you, and you can be intimidated by all these people. But they have been. Everyone has just been incredibly kind and willing to interact and just welcome the people in. So it's just been a totally the atmosphere has blew my mind. I didn't expect it to be this welcoming, and just football people are awesome, and it's been awesome to interact with them.
Yeah, I know John and I have done some exploratory research into prices for monthly rent for an office down here. I think we're both going to just quit our jobs, come down here, open up an office, and that we can be totally ingrained in the culture all year long. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to get a little bit of a showcase into each position, kind of work our way through. I'm steering the boat today. We got two great guests on it, and Joe. So they will be kind of giving you guys the content, the insight going through. We'll just work our way at the top, talk about quarterbacks, because it's what everybody wants to talk about, to be honest. Some buzzy names there, so some names that people have smaller followings that believe in these guys. So what we just like to do is kind of mention at length a couple of them and work our way all the way through the roster. So today we saw North Squad first. Bryan, I'm going to give you the floor first, since I didn't get your thoughts on the culture here in Mobile. So why don't you tell us a little bit about somebody you watched with our first practice today and what stood out about them throughout the first 2 days here at the Senior Bowl?
Hey, before I actually start talking about the quarterbacks, Kyle, I want to also piggyback onto something that Luke and Joe talked about regarding the Senior Bowl experience, which I think is a very underrated part of this whole thing, is that, all year long, we interact on what's commonly referred to as draft Twitter with each other. And we talk about the draft, we talk about the prospects, we compare notes, scouting reports, mock drafts. And this is really the one place, the few days a year, where you actually get to take that imaginary world of Twitter and turn it into a reality by meeting a lot of these people that you deal with on a daily basis. Guys like Matt Waldman and Chris Burke, Dane Brugler, I finally got a chance to meet Justice Mosqueda after all this time. It's a really great way to turn that Twitter world into more of a reality and continue networking and building relationships within the media, the draft media, and a way to advance your personal goals as well. So one of the things I would strongly recommend is for anybody out there who enjoys writing about the draft, is aspiring to be a scout on any level, this is the place to come to really network beyond just evaluating talent and really educating yourself from a live scouting perspective on the draft class. It's the ideal, networking week, really, where you can rub elbows with decision makers and potential employers in the future as well. So I'd strongly recommend the week for that alone, in addition to the things that Luke and Joe talked about. But getting back to your question, Kyle, about the quarterbacks, obviously the big ticket item down here is Carson Wentz. Everybody wants to talk about him. Everybody wants to know how he's doing. And, coming into the week, I was high on Carson Wentz, not necessarily as high as some of our colleagues, but he was a guy who I thought had a chance to be a very productive NFL quarterback, likely a day 2 pick, in my opinion. But coming down here and just seeing him, both on the hoof at the weigh-ins, looking the part, just over 6'5", 233 pounds, built for the position. He's going to be able to withstand NFL punishment. He has the frame to stand tall in the pocket and take the hits that are going to be delivered on the NFL level. And in addition to that, seeing him on the field and just taking command of his fellow seniors playing in this game, it's especially more impressive to me considering he's coming from an FCS school and playing alongside guys that, have played in the biggest conferences, in stadiums with 80,000 people, and he looks like he's already playing on Sundays. He has that kind of command on the field and that kind of leadership quality. And then add into it the most important aspect, which is his physical traits. And you watch him throw the ball and you just see it. I mean, it's really as simple as that. You just see it. You see an NFL quarterback. You see a guy that a franchise can take in the top 10 and feel confident that they have a kid who's going to lead them, for a decade or more, barring injuries if he stays healthy. He's that kind of guy. From the mental makeup, I wrote about this not too long ago on Draft Breakdown in reference to his decision to play in the FCS championship game, despite the potential risk to his draft stock if he re-injured himself. Now, the fact that he put that secondary to his team's goals of winning a championship, was a little bit of insight into his psychology and what goes on above the shoulders, which is the hardest thing for talent evaluators to be able to acquire, is the knowledge of what's going on inside of a prospect's head and inside their heart. And the fact that he came back for that game and ultimately won the championship for his team showed a lot. And now here, seeing him in person and the leadership that he's exhibiting on the field, it just piggybacks off that decision to play in the in his FCS championship game. So, yeah, I think there's a really good chance that he could be the second quarterback off the board, and I do think it's not out of the question that he challenges Goff, for QB1 on my overall big board.
Yeah, and that's you kind of mirror where my stance was, in that I liked Carson Wentz. I was not crazy about Carson Wentz. I kind of really resisted this building narrative, FCS quarterback. But the traits are there, the things you look for are there, and he's done nothing but do great things so far this week. And I think that's a testament to, if you're invited to come down to the Senior Bowl, you can practically, unless you just flat out do not belong on the field, do nothing but help your draft stock. And Joe, I want to come to you next. There is a quarterback on the South roster that I know that you were a little bit interested in, as maybe not an early round pick, but somebody who had caught your eye with their 2015 season. Can you tell us a little bit about your prospect that you had your eye on?
Yeah, I came in very intrigued to see the Mississippi State quarterback, Dak Prescott, perform this week, particularly after seeing him live at the Belk Bowl against NC State, where he played really, really well. And it's worth noting that he improved so much from 2014 to 2015 as a player that people thought was kind of a Tim Tebow-like prospect, where didn't really have the arm to go with his stature and his athletic ability, but then he really improved as a passer in 2015. And you wanted to see that just kind of continue throughout the draft process. And so just watching him this week, it was a lot of what you saw on tape, which is not really a surprise. He's got the impressive physical makeup, the right body type, thick in the lower half, but the inconsistency is there a little bit with his arm. And that's why we're not talking about Dak Prescott as a day one or probably even a day two prospect. But he's a guy that, in the right system with the right mentor around him, he can be a useful player. Maybe a reliable backup or somebody who challenges to be a starter in time. So he's been inconsistent, but you see the arm, you see the physical ability, you see the command. Not quite to the degree of a Carson Wentz, what he's shown in terms of just running the show with ease. But Dak Prescott's a guy that's been comfortable. He's got the efficiency with his footwork, but again, some of the ball placement stuff was inconsistent. But at the same time, he showcases an NFL caliber arm.
And Luke, I'm going to kind of transition right to you to wrap up the quarterbacks. We heard about two quarterbacks that have done things this week that people liked. In the case of Wentz, it was, what is the stage like? What is the stage presence when suddenly you're under the big lights? And with Prescott, it's continuing to build that positive momentum off of this 2015 tape. Who stood out to you as far as the rest of this crop that left a little bit of something to be desired coming into the week?
I think it was Brandon Allen, Arkansas quarterback. I think that there's a reason, I think, into today's practice where you saw him being the quarterback that was doing handoffs in certain drills as opposed to being a part of some of the passing drills when they were doing skeleton and full team. But, it's just, like you said, we talk about checking the boxes, and I think what Brandon Allen's performance this week has done so far is check them on the flip side and check them in a way that says, I don't know if he can do this. I don't know if he can put the zip on the deep out that you need to be successful in this league. Especially as opposed to some of the other quarterbacks that have either been as advertised or have impressed, particularly Dak Prescott. I completely agree with Joe. I came into this week really unsure what the rest of the quarterback rankings would look like for me and how that would shake out. But I think the week started very strongly for Prescott, and when he came in at 6'2", 225, he's built to withstand the punishment, but also has, I think, more height than really a lot of people expected. And I don't know whether that's because of some of the comparisons he's had to other quarterbacks, and maybe they just expected him to come in shorter than he was listed. But the fact that he came in at a solid 6'2", 225, or I think that's what he weighed in at, it was, just a very, very good step for him this week. But again, I think Brandon Allen's really the one that stood out as far as not taking advantage of the opportunity, and really, like you mentioned earlier, somebody who proves maybe they just don't belong on that same plane as some of the older quarterbacks that we've seen this week.
Definitely. And for those of you listening, I put a ton of stock into quarterbacks with Luke. Luke was a quarterback himself, so the dude knows what he's talking about. But we're going to transition into a position which I can guarantee you none of us have ever played in our lives, which is the running back class. Flipping back to the north side, Joe, I'm going to start with you first this time. Is there somebody out of this crop of running backs from the north squad? And it should be noted that DJ Foster from Arizona State was added as of last night onto the north roster, replacing Chris Swain of Navy. Any of those names, Irvin, Foster, Dixon, Vanuku, any of them stand out to you with anything that they've done so far this week?
Yeah, the name that stands out to me is Tyler Irvin out of San Jose State. He's a guy that I spent some time looking at in the weeks coming into Mobile, and you look him up, and he's listed at 5'10", 177 pounds. And so you almost write him off just based on his size. You watch his tape, he has some ability, he has some juices, he has burst, he has receiving skills, but he's 177 pounds. There's not a list of anyone in the NFL that's successful at running back at that weight. Well, we show up here in the Underwear Olympics on Tuesday morning, and Tyler Irvin walks in, 5'10", 192 pounds. That's a game changer for him in terms of how you look at him as an NFL running back, just based on him meeting certain thresholds that he has to meet. So obviously, he's back on my radar a bit, so I pay attention to him in practice, and he's lightning in a bottle to an extent. And he's a guy that I think is an ideal scat back, and also a kick returner. I think he can make some money on the NFL stage in both of those areas.
Yeah, Irvin really made me eat my words. We did a Periscope that you hosted on the drive down the last 45 minutes of that lovely 8-hour drive. And somebody asked us about Irving, and I just kind of poo-pooed him and said, one of those tiny 5'9", 175, pocket rocket running backs, that they've got skills. It's obvious they have short area agility and running capabilities, but, when you're that size, it's really hard for NFL teams to take you seriously or consider you for a legitimate investment. So for him to walk in here and be as much bigger as he was compared to what he was advertised, it's a huge win for him. Luke, I'm going to flip over to you for the South Side running backs. Anybody out of a crop of Kenyon Drake, Aaron Green, DeAndre Washington, Jonathan Williams, Dan Vitale, anybody stand out to you?
I think Aaron Green first flashed a couple times during full team. Again, a smaller back may not be able to be a full-time, running back at the next level, but showed some quickness, some explosion between the tackles, which again, for a back of his size, you like to see. And then Kenyon Drake, I'll kind of piggyback off something Bryan and I were talking about earlier in terms of what his role could be at the next level. Bryan, you mentioned that he could be in a Charles Sims type role in Tampa Bay as that kind of third down back. Who again, build-wise, they're not necessarily similar, but I think he could be, very, very productive in that same sort of role. So again, not a lot of every down types in that group. I think last year we saw more of those guys like David Cobb and David Johnson and some of those guys. But doesn't mean there's not value at that position on the South squad. I think Kenyon Drake in the right situation, given the right role, could be a very explosive, very productive player in the NFL.
Yeah, he's a really exciting runner. Bryan, I know there's an exciting runner that you wanted to get a couple thoughts in on.
Yeah, for me, the top running back coming into the week was Kenneth Dixon from Louisiana Tech, and I don't think he's done anything to change that opinion. He's just shown a complete skill set down here. I haven't hyper focused on the running backs just yet. They're going to be my focus tomorrow. But when I take a peek over at what that position group has been doing, Kenneth Dixon continues to flash to me as a complete running back with a well-rounded game, and while this is going to seem like very, very lofty praise for him, and by no means do I make this comparison to suggest his career will be similar. I think he just reminds me of a LaDainian Tomlinson type of player from the perspective of how he's a shifty, elusive, quick-footed running back who has natural hands as a pass catcher, who's going to be a dual threat in the league. And he's not going to be that kind of dual threat like we saw with Duke Johnson, who, makes plays primarily as a receiver or a third down back. I think Dixon's going to be more of a well-rounded guy coming out of the backfield, playing first and second down in a traditional running back role, running between the tackles, and then on third down being able to be an asset in the passing game, a lot like LT was during his heyday. Now, mind you, I'm not predicting that or projecting that Kenneth Dixon's going to be a Hall of Fame running back when it's all said and done, but from a poor man's perspective, I think he does have a lot of the similar qualities that LaDainian Tomlinson had, and I would imagine he's going to be a day 2 pick, and he could even, before this process is all said and done, challenge Derrick Henry as the second running back off the board behind Ezekiel Elliott.
I'll tell you what, the 3 other guys in the room just kind of loosened their collars because it got a little hot in here.
I don't mean to jump in real quick, but we just sent out a tweet from the Draft Breakdown account. If anybody out there has any questions for the crew that's here, please tweet them to the Draft Breakdown account. I see a few questions have already come in, and we'll definitely do a roundtable on the questions that are submitted before we end the show.
Definitely. We have wide receivers and tight ends. Next, we're just going to condense them into pass catchers. Luke, I'm going to start with you. North or south? Who's the guy that stood out to you the most?
I think overall Jay Lee has been the most impressive to me as far as my expectations coming into the week, and really after 2 days of looking at the entire receiver crop. He's the one that I think I've been most pleasantly surprised with. Obviously the size jumps out, right off the bat, but his ability, great body control, had a great one-handed catch that we saw. He didn't get inbounds, but just the ball skills, the concentration, strong hands, the ability to adjust in the air to a back shoulder throw like that and make a play like that. We've seen a lot of pre-draft attention going towards Corey Coleman from that Baylor offense. But Jay Lee has definitely proven over these first couple of days that he warrants a lot of consideration, and maybe one of those guys that sends you back to the film as a guy that I didn't really think a whole lot of coming into this week. Definitely going to send me back to look at more of his tape and see what I'm missing.
Definitely, and that's an interesting dynamic. We've had a couple players like that this week that I've kind of talked with all 3 of you about, just kind of gauging everybody's personal philosophy on. What the heck do you do when you have a guy that comes in here and he's super physical on his stem, and he's not letting anybody reroute him. He's running through contact, and he's physical at the catch point, showing good hands. And then you go back and you watch some of the Baylor tape, and there's this disconnect there. So it's always interesting to try and connect the dots and fill in that space. Bryan, any pass catchers that stand out to you aside of Jay Lee?
Yeah, the guy that's jumped off the field to me is, we'll say Braxton Miller, I guess. He's the obvious guy, but Malcolm Mitchell to me is a player who has really excelled this week. Malcolm Mitchell is a player that I remember, several years ago during his early days at Georgia, looked like he was on the fast track to be an early round draft pick, and then, unfortunate injuries have all but derailed that. He's gotten healthy and he seems to be peaking at the right time. And down here in Mobile, he's shown he's a slick route runner, very, very good hands. He made, in my opinion, the best catch so far this week during the first practice session in Fairhope, where he went, it was out of bounds, but he dove and made a one-handed catch that was Odell Beckham-like, and just shows the body control, coordination, natural hands that he has, and he's running really good routes and stuff for these D-backs to stay on him. He's not the biggest, thickest guy, but he's creating separation. He's fighting through, physical, press coverage as well. I think he's a player that's going to be very underrated or undervalued. I guess you could say it's not necessarily unfair because he does have a major red flag in terms of the injury profile, but somebody's going to get him on day 3, and I would imagine that before it's all said and done, Malcolm Mitchell is going to be a very productive receiver, and potentially as quickly as his rookie year coming in as that 3rd or 4th receiver. And if there's ever an injury on the depth chart ahead of him, I could see Malcolm Mitchell contributing at a high rate, pretty early in his pro career.
Yeah, I turned to Joe about halfway through the South practice, and the wide receivers were running one-on-ones against the defensive backs. And I said to Joe, Malcolm Mitchell, you literally don't even hear the ball when it hits his hands. Every other receiver running through there, whether it was Peak, May, the tight ends, you would hear the ball hit the gloves with the hands. And Mitchell's hands are so soft, we're sitting up in the stands and you can't even hear. So definitely I thought he's been really, really impressive. Joe, I think you've got somebody from the other group for us. Maybe give a little bit of love to our friends who stick their hand in the dirt every so often.
Yeah, that's right. I want to talk about Nick Vanett, the Ohio State tight end. He looks the part if there ever was a guy that looked the part. Came in just under 6'6", 256 pounds, 33 and a quarter inch arms, and an 81-inch wingspan. And just impressive looking individual. And he can play. And he's a guy that has done all the things that you want to see a tight end do in these situations in terms of a nice clean release off the line of scrimmage, and then getting into his routes and showing soft hands and being that reliable security blanket for the quarterback. Another thing he's done is show the ability to have good awareness when running routes against zone coverage, to sit down and show his numbers to the quarterback and just being that reliable security blanket. I think he has some athletic ability to him as well. He's flashed the ability to get into space and turn and get upfield and work the seam quite a bit. So in the tight end group that's weak, Nick Vanett has really, really stood out.
Yeah, I know Bryan made the comment the first day, he's out there running routes like Kowski because he's trying to run through people and be super physical at the top of his steps. He kind of reeled himself in, and that's when he found the sweet spot. I thought, once he acknowledged, okay, I can be physical with these guys, but I'm not going to run straight through their numbers. And he gets that little bit of contact at the top and bumps off. That's when he does his best work.
So we're getting some reports here through Twitter that the sound quality, that we appear to be having some echoing issues with the sound quality. We're going to try to remedy that as we go along here. Please bear with us, and also send some tweets along. If this is almost to the point where the echo is so bad you really can't understand it, please let us know so we can, take a little time out and try to remedy that before we go on any further.
Sure. So we'll move on to the big guys. Everybody likes the Hogs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Joe, I'm going to start with you. Offensive linemen. You have the North and South. You're nodding your head. You know who you want to talk about already. So why don't you go ahead and take color?
Of course. This is somewhat self-serving, but Jason Spriggs out of Indiana. Back in December, I wrote an article and I said, Jason Spriggs has the chance to be the third offensive tackle in this class behind Tunsil and Stanley. And he's done everything that he can this week to really prove that that's a true statement. He's certainly forcing the issue by being here and playing well. Obviously, Taylor Decker couldn't be here, and Jack Conklin, another classman, but Jason Spriggs has really, really impressed. He's physically impressive with his size and stature, and just the way that he looks. He has the frame, and then he's just got such efficient feet, and he moves so well. He can mirror and pass protection. He's polished. He can drive, block, he can get out in space. He's just doing all the things that you want. And just you combine that with his physical traits, he has the physical ability to go with it. He's a talented blocker. Don't be surprised when Jason Spriggs is the third offensive tackle selected in this draft.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, he's smooth. I'll give you that. He has no trouble dealing with speed. Is the best mirror pass protector here. So I've definitely been impressed as well. Luke, is there anybody that you can think of that stood out to you?
The first name that comes to mind, other than Spriggs, I've been impressed with him as well, is Nick Martin from Notre Dame. I think that his versatility, that's something to me that's one of the first things I look for, especially with interior offensive linemen. You're going to have injuries in the NFL. You're over a 16-game season, you're going to have to prove that you have depth at a lot of positions. The offensive line, I think, is one of the more important ones. So when you find players that can be effective at both center or guard, or both guard and tackle, it's very, very valuable, I think, to a lot of front offices at the next level. So with Nick Martin, the ability to play guard, but also to show this week that he can play center as well and be effective, I think that, again, it adds value when you're able to do that. And his performance against, again, some of the best in the country as far as interior defensive linemen. We've seen some fantastic interior defensive linemen this week in Mobile, and Nick Martin's definitely held his own, I think, as well as anybody has.
Yeah, and that's I'm looking forward to us getting that group because I might have to jump in here and start talking as well. So I think the defensive line is probably the deepest group that we have. Bryan, before we get into the defensive guys, is there anybody who stands out to you along the offensive line that has either done well for themselves or maybe struggled?
Well, I think if we want to talk about the offensive linemen who are struggling, it pretty much stops and starts with Willie Beavers. Unfortunately, I don't like, the negative talk about a young man who's coming out here and trying to live out his dream. But Willie Beavers just honestly doesn't look like he belongs right now. I think the problem is they have him playing tackle. He needs to be kicked into guard. He's just simply not quick enough. He's not strong enough to be able to hang with the edge rushers down here who have really stolen the show so far in Mobile. So Willie Beavers, I'd like to see them maybe try him at some different positions before the week is out. But in terms of a guy that's impressed me, is Cole Toner, the Ivy Leaguer from Harvard, who's really making probably the most difficult jump that any prospect would have to make from the Ivy League to the NFL. While he's been up and down throughout the week, I do think that he has shown at least that he belongs from a strength and physical standpoint. And with more coaching, a couple of years into his NFL career, he could be a really valuable rotational depth offensive lineman, potentially even, progress into a starter's role at some point. So I'm very, very critical and hard on the Ivy League kids that come out because of the jump that they have to make. But Cole Toner has really impressed me, much more than, for example, Zach Hodges last year. I just really felt like he was exposed down here. Toner has done the complete opposite. I think he belongs.
Luke, pass rushers, interior defensive line. You just got done giving them some love. I'm going to put you on the spot now. I'm going to make you pick one to talk about now. Who you got?
I've talked a lot about Noah Spence leading up to this week, and I think he has been very impressive this week. But again, when it's somebody that coming into the week you expect to play well, I like to kind of note that and then focus my attention on somebody who really I feel like has made a splash this week. And there's two guys that really come to mind, but if you're going to make me pick one, it's Sheldon Rankins from Louisville. I think that he has just been as dominant as any single player in this entire week so far.
It's been outstanding.
Just the quickness, the hand usage, the explosiveness. I mean, he's been the guy that I think has made people look silly. We go back a couple years ago to see what Aaron Donald did from the defensive tackle spot. I don't think Rankins is quite at that level. He's a different player also, but I feel like he's had that level of domination, especially in one-on-one drills so far this week.
And apologies to my other two colleagues, but I have to jump in here. Luke mentioned that there's two guys that have stood out, and Rankins has definitely been one, and the other one is Illinois defensive end / defensive tackle Jihad Ward. And I'm not letting either one of these two guys take this one. This guy, the first time I watched him swing through those bags, he has some of the most powerful, compact hands. The pop that he's able to generate in a short amount of space is just truly impressive. And me and Joe, I just kind of elbowed Joe and I said, get a load of this guy. So we're watching him come back through, and he's knocking these bags over like they're not even there. And there's some flexibility in the torso, some mobility that you see that the other guys just don't have, because if you're slamming these heavy bags, it takes a lot of torque, rotational power that has to be applied to get it. And this is a guy that weighed in at 6'5", 296 pounds, going through agility and bag drills looking like he's 265. So me and Joe turned to Bryan and we said, look, we got to get this guy a little bit of love. So shout out to Rolo from the Draft Breakdown video team, who actually heard our cry for help and answered our prayer. And he gave us a Jihad Ward cut against Ohio State. So be sure to, when we're done here, swing over to draftbreakdown.com's video page and take a look. He's a little raw around the edges, but he's one of those moldable balls of clay that some defensive line coach is just going to be salivating over getting his hands on because he's got all the movement skills, all the power, and a frame that looks like you can mold it into whatever you want it to be. So with that in mind, Bryan, I hope I didn't steal your thunder here, man. Any other defensive linemen stand out to you?
No, you didn't steal my thunder, but I would echo your thoughts. I mean, I definitely think that Jihad Ward is somebody who defensive line coach is going to really want to get their hands on because he does have he's displaying some rare traits from a power standpoint. My only concern with him is, what is he going to do once that power is neutralized? A guy like Jason Spriggs, for example, was able to withstand his initial punch and, pretty much drive him into the ground and pancake him. So the issue with Jihad Ward for me is you're working with such a great starting point, in which is that natural, rare, explosive power, but he's going to have to develop some second and third moves to complement that in order to really become, something special on the NFL level. A guy that I found interesting today, not necessarily because he was overwhelmingly good, but just because he's overwhelmingly unique, and that's Sheldon Day from Notre Dame. You look at this guy, and his body type is kind of strange in a way. He's 286 pounds, kind of a little soft around the midsection area. I would like to see him drop maybe 15, 20 pounds and almost get into a hybrid type of NFL position, like a Pernell McPhee type, to see if he can really utilize his natural athleticism and coordination to be a mismatch on the edge and become actually a pretty productive pass rusher and violent force for the 3-4 defense. I don't know how well he'll be able to do at his current stature. If he played a traditional defensive line position, I think he could get lost along the way like a Will Sutton. But in general, Sheldon Day is a guy that really piques my curiosity to see what an NFL team will do with him next year.
All right, so we actually have 4 in this rotation. Joe, you drew the short straw, buddy.
I did.
Who you got?
Well, I'm just going to go for the Alabama defensive tackle, Jerron Reed. Loved his tape coming in. I knew that he was an outstanding run defender, maybe even an elite level run defender in terms of his ability to reset the line of scrimmage, stack and shed, and make plays. What I wanted to see from him this week was pass rushing upside. And let's be honest, that's not his strength. But did he show enough to convince me that he can contribute as a pass rusher? And I'd say the answer to that is yes, particularly with his hand technique. It's very, very, very good. He's the kind of guy that knows how to swipe, use his length and power to create pressure. He's also a guy that was a little more nimble than I thought he would be working through the bag drills, and he has a lot of power in his hands, very, very heavy punch. So he's a guy that needed to do that, because I don't know that you can take an elite just run stopping defensive tackle in the first round, but I think that he showed the pass rush skills needed this week to be in that conversation.
And because the defensive line class here at the Senior Bowl is so deep, I've actually received a petition to continue to extend this for 2 other players. So, Luke, who you got?
Just 2 guys in particular. I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention their names. First, Vernon Butler from Louisiana Tech. I feel like he's had a great week so far. And then more so today, Wednesday, than Tuesday, I really felt like Lawrence Thomas from Michigan State had a strong practice today as well, particularly in one-on-one drills and then in some of the half-line stuff that they did. So, again, just such a deep group. And there's just going to be so many, I think, day 1 and day 2 players to come out of that position group, particularly the deepest in the draft.
Yeah, and I think Butler deserves a lot of credit because he was listed on the handout that we got on the 25th, which was printed an hour before the weigh-ins, that what he was listed at, at either at the beginning of the season or the end of the season, Butler was 6'3", 309 pounds. His weigh-in was at 325 pounds, and he has been out there on the field looking well-conditioned, moving extremely well. He's looking fairly fluid, so he's a really impressive athlete for his size, and he's bigger than he was billed. It's another one of these cases where there's bad weight and good weight. Don't just put weight on for the sake of putting on weight. Butler seems like somebody who really came in here really working and honing on building his body, his quote-unquote resume for this draft process, and it's paying dividends, and you're really seeing that. For the sake of time, we want to make sure we leave enough space at the back end of this for you guys and questions that you've submitted throughout the course of the, I believe, 40 minutes or so that we've been going now. I'm just going to kind of condense linebackers and defensive back. We'll do back 7 in the defense. So, Joe, I gave you the short end of the straw last time. I'm going to give you first crack at it here. Linebackers, defensive backs, your back 7. Is there anybody who stood out to you thus far with 1 day left to go?
Yeah, I'm going to continue to pub the University of Alabama players here.
He was mine, man.
Well, I stole your thunder. Cyrus Jones, the cornerback who has improved every year at Alabama, and he's peaking at the right time. And he showed up here chiseled, in great shape, a stocky frame, and he's come out here and just had quality rep after quality rep. Very, very natural athlete, very smooth, very fluid, and he has the cover skills to go with it. Very competitive at the ball, at the catch point. He's a guy that I thought that was something he needed to work on coming into this week, where just playing the ball on the air and getting his head around. He's done that, and he's a guy that I think has a lot of upside as a defensive back, maybe even a starter relatively soon in his NFL career.
Awesome. And I'll take the next one because I got a bone to pick here, okay? If I'm looking at this official roster, Daddy Nicholas is listed as a linebacker. He has spent almost his exclusive amount of time rushing the passer, playing with his hand down. So I want to know why Kyler Fackrell is playing off the ball all week. He had 2 reps today in pass rush, and he kicked some behind. You know, he went after Kyle Murphy, and he got him twice. He got him once with speed and once with power and technique. So Kyler Fackrell is a name that I really like. He had a good weigh-in. He came across that stage, looked like he had maybe 2 pounds of fat on his entire body. The dude was cut up, 6'5", 245 pounds. The tape that he had at Utah State was really strong when he was rushing the passer and playing the run on the edge. And all week, it's similar to, I know Bryan has mentioned this several times, that this was done with Kikaha last year. This is somebody who had strong tape at the line of scrimmage who's playing off the ball. And I don't know if that's coaches want to see that. I don't know if that's his decision. But it's frustrating for me because it's not giving me a look at what I think is fairly evident is what he does best. So I've been disappointed with Fackrell, but not for the fact that he's performed poorly, just for the fact that he's been performing at a position that's not really realistic when you look at his resume and what he does best. Luke, back 7. Who you got?
I'm just going to move to the secondary. I got a few guys, so I'll just touch on each of them quickly. I came into this week really expecting and hoping for big things out of 2 of the safeties that I really thought highly of. Kevin Byard from Middle Tennessee and Miles Killebrew from Southern Utah. And both of those guys have been very pleasant, not surprises, but they've really backed up what I hoped to see this week against top competition. Again, one coming from kind of a mid-major school, the other coming from a much smaller school in Southern Utah, and Killebrew. But with Killebrew, you got that big rocked up frame, but his ability to stay flexible, to stay fluid in coverage, to be explosive, I think has been really impressive. Spent a lot of time talking with him on Tuesday evening. Just a real bright kid, you know, very eloquent, very great attitude and work ethic type kid. Kevin Byard, very much the same way. Big time playmaker, 19 career interceptions at Middle Tennessee State, big playmaker. And he showed that in today's practice. Came away with 2 interceptions in different periods in today's practice. So, and then moving to corner, a guy that I really didn't have much on my radar at all, and then really flashed over the last couple of days was Tavon Young out of Temple.
Oh yeah,
I thought that he played very, very well. Had multiple plays in coverage, just exploding to the ball, great hands, and playing the ball very, very well, getting his back turned. And not letting the ball or the receiver beat him. So very, very impressed with him this week, and we'll definitely be digging a lot more into his tape based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, that dude has sweet feet. I mean, he's very quick in short areas. He's a little tiny, but that dude's got sweet feet, can close short areas down real quick. So I'm going to turn to Bryan. Bryan, you've been kind of on the beat, working the draft breakdown handle. You fish any good questions out for us?
Well, we're just going to go through the list here as they came in, and we'll start with Austin, whose Twitter handle is @WizardsNation. And he had a question about Noah Spence, and he says, Spence seems to be excelling and getting to the quarterback this week. Thoughts on his coverage ability / potential? Our resident Noah Spence fan club president, Luke Easterling, I think, can handle this one.
Yeah, I think I'll take it back to what, Kyle, you said about Kyler Fackrell. I think that if they had Fackrell doing what they've had Spence doing all week, it would be a different story as far as his performance. I think what they've done with Spence is keep him where he needs to be, which is with his hand in the dirt. I know people might look at his listed size and think he's a guy who's one of those tweener, stand up, maybe 3-4 guys. I personally think even at his current weight that he is at his best, putting his hand in the dirt and rushing the passer. He's just, when we talk about natural pass rushers, we talk about guys who just, no matter what, they have a knack for being able to get to the quarterback and make plays. And that's just what you see when you put on the film, whether it's Ohio State or Eastern Kentucky. It's just a guy who ends up in the backfield all the time. And I think they've done a great job of letting him just do that this week. I would not put him at a stand-up linebacker. I would not move him back at a strong side position. He needs to be rushing the passer full time.
All right, the next question comes from I'm going to try to pronounce this as well as as accurately as possible. This is from Laikram Bennett Prasad, and his Twitter handle unfortunately is not showing up here, but he asks, how high can Reggie Ragland's draft stock go? Can he go top 10 with a great performance this week? So I'm going to turn this over to Joe Marino to discuss Mr. Reggie Ragland.
My answer to that question is going to be a little bit surprising to a lot of people, I think, but it's no. Reggie Ragland on tape is, and remember, your game tape is your draft stock. So all of this is important, but at the end of the day, it's how did you perform on Saturdays? And Reggie Ragland is an outstanding C-gap to C-gap run defender. That's it. He's limited to that. And he's a guy that's come in here and he's wanting to play outside linebacker on the edge and rush the passer. And quite honestly, he did that a lot at Alabama because he has limitations in coverage. On third downs, he's rushing the passer. And he wasn't effective. And he's not effective here doing it either. He doesn't have the burst. He doesn't have the bend. He doesn't have the power to beat offensive tackles. And he hasn't shown the ability to do that here. So I think with his limitations, with him, trying to carve out a niche and not being very successful at it, at the end of the day, he needs to be what he is, and that's not on the edge. And so I don't. To answer the question, no, I don't think he's a top 10 pick.
The next question we'll give to Kyle Krabs here.
Oh, thank you.
It's from AJ. His Twitter handle is @AJIndelicato. And he wants to know about Kevin Peterson, the cornerback. He wants to know, is he a 3rd or 4th round pick?
In short, probably neither. Peterson came in, and each time I watched Peterson, I really appreciated how physical and aggressive his mentality is. Makes plays on the ball very well. But he came in way, way smaller than we thought he would. When we talk about the measurements, and if we're concerned about the measurements, the reason why is we're concerned about, I refer to it as minimum thresholds. You have to meet a certain baseline to be considered to be qualified for these higher investments. And a 3rd or 4th round investment is a fairly rich one in the grand scheme of things. So Peterson came in and he measured at 5 feet and 1/2 inch at 173 pounds with 30-inch arms. That's very concerning on 2 out of the 3 numbers that I've read off. 5'10" is fine. 5'10" and 1/2 inch is a perfectly fine size for a corner, no matter how much people want to try and bag on. My first draft crush at NDT Scouting, Jason Verrett, under 5'10". You want to drum up a narrative, it's fine. How does he play? Peterson is troubling at the catch point. In hindsight, with 30-inch arms, you really limit yourself in your sphere of influence, so to say, at the catch point. Are you able to reach through a receiver's body and play through the hands to break up the pass. With 30-inch arms, that's going to be real hard. And when you're 173 pounds, you can only generate so much pop in your pads. He is somebody who has a lot of likable coverage skills. But the cornerback Kevin White out of TCU from last year, similarly came in here, had this huge following on social media and the outside draft realm. People loved his tape. Came in, measured poorly. People went back to the tape, and White's draft stock, or proverbial draft stock, where he was selected, was much more reflective on what I think you're going to see from Peterson, which is a late day 3 kind of player.
I think I need to pick up Kyle Crabb's microphone off the floor there. That was outstanding, and he's left the room.
I was just going to piggyback off something that Kyle mentioned, and this is because I read a great piece by our buddy Josh Norris over at Roto World this past week. When we talk about those minimum thresholds that teams have, we need to understand that teams try to be as efficient with this process as they can. And we talk about how useful is the weigh-in process, how useful is it to go see, how big these guys are and how short they are and all that stuff. What it does for teams in a lot of situations is they put up these minimum thresholds to be able to thin out that huge number, that 300, 400, 500 number of prospects based on the schemes you run and the things your coaches want to do. It just simplifies the job for their scouting departments to be able to say, listen, if guys don't have this length of arm at corner, we're just going to go ahead and not waste valuable resources and time and man hours going after guys like that. We're going to refocus on that. So it's just one of those things that allows teams to narrow their focus even at this point in the process and just eliminate guys that, again, might be good players, but for what they want, just don't fit.
So the next question comes in from Lieutenant Dan, which is at LT Dan Football. And he wants to know who has stood out at quarterback other than Carson Wentz. And I took a look at the quarterbacks the first day of practice and took a peek over at them as well today. And I think if we're answering that question from a big picture perspective, the short answer is really none of the quarterbacks have stood out in terms of elevating their stock into early round consideration. But the one guy that I think has helped himself is Jacob Coker from Alabama, simply because when it was initially announced that he was going to be participating in the Senior Bowl, a bunch of people, myself included, kind of assumed it was the hometown addition to the game to stir up more local interest, with the Crimson Tide starting quarterback participating for a week's worth of events down here. But the reality is he's proven to be a very competent pro prospect with the potential to be a guy that can be a valuable asset as your number 2 quarterback for quite a long time. He fits the mold of a guy who can sit behind an established starter, a starting quarterback that's in their prime or not yet close to being out of their prime, and just sit behind it in an emergency or injury situation, come in and be a competent, capable player. And in today's NFL, with the number of injuries that happen at that position, a guy like Coker is increasing his value from the standpoint of a draft evaluation and long-term, franchise building model. He can be a very wise investment for a team in the later portion of day 3 to eventually be an active roster guy and a number 2 quarterback on your lineup. The next question comes from, let me see what his Twitter handle is here. It comes from Bacon Mac and Cheese, which is at Samuels_DFW. And his question's a good one. He wanted to know whether or not Sean Oakman is allergic to leg day. And I'm going to send that one over to Kyle Krabs, our resident. He has a degree in basically training, so he can answer that one.
The proper phase is kinesiology, which is exercise science and human movement. And I wanted to just real quick file a complaint. I wanted to know why Lieutenant Dan didn't ask a question about somebody not having any legs.
Or ice cream.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something.
So I think Oakman, I can't speak to his leg day practices. I certainly don't think he's skipping days in the weight room. When he came out on stage, his shoulders and his total frame just kind of took over the entire backdrop that they have that's supposed to just be like the filler so that when they take the photo, like you don't have the blank space behind him. Just a massive, massive player. I do think a lot of the problems I kind of vocalized starting October of last year. I went out and saw Baylor play West Virginia live and saw a lot of problems with short area and readjustment and change of direction skills, and anything that doesn't involve him coming straight at you is problematic for Oakman. And a lot of that's kind of manifested itself in watching him go through the drills, go through the bags, go through pass rushing 101s. He generates force and he gets push to collapse, but he can't turn the corner. I don't know what to do with somebody who's so long, can't play with leverage, and doesn't have the lower body strength to really hold the point of attack. He's all power and he's all upper body. So I don't know if he's allergic to leg day, but he's somebody that teams are really going to have to sit down and try and figure out what to do with. And typically those guys aren't valued too high.
So we're going to take a couple more here. This one we'll approach a little differently. We'll do just a quick rapid fire roundtable here with a simple yes or no answer, and we'll all give our thoughts. This comes from Teddy Pro Bowler. His Twitter handle is @PurpleBuckeye. And he wants to know, has Braxton Miller moved firmly into the first round? Or is it still too early to say? Obviously, at this point in the draft process, it's too early to say anything about a player's grade, but we'll keep this in a bubble here and talk about whether Braxton Miller, his performance starting at the all-important weigh-in where he came in at 6'1", 204, followed up by 2 really impressive days of practice, whether or not that is enough to suggest that he is now a first-round player. So we'll start with Luke, and we'll work our way around here. So, Luke, just a simple yes or no. Is Braxton Miller firmly a first-round guy?
I wouldn't say he's firmly a first-round guy. Sorry, it's not. That's more than a yes or no. But no, I don't think he's firmly there yet. I think maybe top 50, top 40. First round's still a little rich for me.
Joe?
No.
Kyle?
No.
So I'm kind of bringing up the rear here, and I'm going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes.
Woo!
I think Braxton Miller has really shown what evaluators want to see from a prospect in terms of the ability to just take over a field from the athletic standpoint. At his position, when you think about the fact that he's still learning how to play wide receiver, I think that's a little bit of an overrated sentiment right now, because his experience at quarterback really has given him the ability mentally to process exactly what a receiver's responsibilities are. He may be learning the physical aspects of the position, but mentally he knows exactly what he would want as a quarterback for the receiver to do, and I think that puts him ahead of the learning curve. And when you look at his measurables, 6'1", over 200 pounds, he's going to run in the 4.4s. He has soft hands. He's already running crisp routes. I think you're looking at Braxton Miller as a firm top 32 pick in this year's NFL draft. So we'll pick. Do we have time for one more, Kyle? What do you think?
Yeah, we could squeeze probably 1 or 2 more.
All right. So let me kind of go through here. We'll go from Miguel, who is at I_am_Hugo Mango. And
It's very elaborate.
he asked, what other quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl besides Dak Prescott can you see as a dual threat starter and be picked up in day 2 or day 3? Joe, we'll start with you there in terms of any quarterback. Catching you off guard here, Joe. Any quarterbacks that you think have showed the ability down here to be a dual threat potential starter with day 2 or 3 value?
Yeah, you know what? The answer to that's no. But let's. If you said I had to pick one,
Braxton Miller.
why not? If you said I had to pick one, Lord, let me throw a crazy dart here, and nobody can hold me to this.
Close your eyes, Joe.
Jeff Driscoll out of Louisiana Tech. I think he's got a great frame. He's a guy that was obviously very productive this year for Louisiana Tech. To just kind of bring this into just the quarterbacks in this class at the Senior Bowl, I think he gives you the best chance, even though I think that's a very, very long shot.
So we'll finish this up with a question from Mike Alford, who is at Alford, ALFORD 908. And as a Cowboys fan, he's saying that he wants the Cowboys to draft Wentz, but he's afraid that if they move down, the 49ers will take him at number 7 overall. He wants to know, is number 4 too high to draft Wentz? We'll treat this one again as a roundtable. I'll start, and Mr. Krabs will bring up the rear. I personally do not think that number 4 is too high for Carson Wentz at this point. In fact, I think if any team should take him that high, it is the Dallas Cowboys, because that's the perfect situation. Sit behind Tony Romo, a quarterback with a similar skill set. Tony Romo seems like a guy who would not feel threatened by an early first-round pick joining the team. Tony Romo has some injury issues he has to overcome now. Carson Wentz at number 4 to the Cowboys would absolutely be good value, and I think it would be a great pick.
I think that sometimes there's two different questions buried in this. I think that in a vacuum, is Carson Wentz the number 4 best player in this draft or the top 5 best player in this draft overall? I don't think that's the case. But when you talk about how important the quarterback position is, when you talk about the fact that the Cowboys are in a rare situation where they are picking in the top 5, and what their situation is at quarterback moving forward, and the fact that they are here coaching this team and getting a front row seat to see the things that we've seen Carson Wentz exhibit, when you talk about whether or not a guy is worth the number 4 pick, or whether or not you think he makes sense, or you would have to take him at that pick. I definitely think, first of all, if you're going to be interested in taking him, you can't move down at all. I don't care who you are, really. If you want him, you're going to have to stay where you are in that top 5, top 10 to make that pick. And second of all, I'm of the mindset where if you need a franchise quarterback, if that's what you're after in the first round, even if you have a guy anywhere near that range graded, and that's what you need, if you would take a guy at 15 and plan on him becoming your franchise quarterback, you should be prepared to take that guy at 4 or 2 or wherever else.
Yeah, in a quarterback-driven league, I think you've got to have your guy. And if the Dallas Cowboys believe that Carson Wentz is their guy, then you turn in that card and you don't think twice about it. Again, as Luke said, having their staff here, they're going to know. They're going to know what they need to know if he's worth that pick. And, the argument against it is that you're passing up on other blue-chip prospects. And at number 4, I think they have an opportunity to get one of those. But at the end of the day, if you don't have your quarterback, you don't have anything in this league. And if the Cowboys believe in him, they've got to turn in that card and pick Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I want to thank Bryan for saving me for last for this question, so that everyone has pretty much echoed all of my sentiments. And with that in mind, I'm not even going to give him the chance to come back and ask any more questions. I'm cutting it off. This is my ship. Bryan, look at me. I'm the captain now. Right? So, thank you all very much for joining us. This has been a great episode of 365 Draft. We were able to get 2 great guests in Brian Perez and Luke Easterling on here. I would like each of you, we'll start with Luke first and then make Bryan wait. Tell us, obviously you guys, if you're listening, you know about these guys, you know where to find their stuff. But again, just refresh our memories. Tell us where to find your stuff, and probably your Twitter handle so they can tweet all sorts of spam and harassing comments at you for your takes.
Please do. At Luke Easterling on Twitter, nice and simple. Again, I cover the draft for Bleacher Report, so if you guys have the Team Stream app or anything like that, you'll see my stuff come through there, and I tweet it out as well. And then I also cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Scout.com over at Bucksplits.com. So check that out, all you Bucs fans out there. We'll have some more Bucs-specific stuff there.
And, rather than, send out my Twitter handle and all that stuff, I'd rather everybody that's listening out there right now, just make sure you give these guys a follow. Kyle, Joe, Luke, they'll give their own handles now, but especially the guys at Draft Breakdown, the video team. Like we mentioned earlier, one example is the fabulous Mr. Rolo, adding a player pretty much while we were sitting in the bleachers watching the practices. Make sure you go on the Draft Breakdown Twitter account. There's a pinned tweet on there that has all of the video editors' Twitter handles. Make sure you follow them, share their work, share their contact information. Without those guys, we would not have the scouting cuts that we all enjoy. And also make sure you give my partner, Aaron Aloysius, a follow. He is kind of the unheralded heartbeat that keeps Draft Breakdown going. So please make sure you let him know about your appreciation for the site as well. And if you ever have any requests or things that you think we could do better at Draft Breakdown, please email me, contact me through the site, or send me a direct message.
Awesome, awesome stuff, you guys. Joe, any passing thoughts here? I'll give you the final word here. What are you looking for tomorrow?
I guess what I'm looking forward to is just for the 5th day in a row doing nothing but talking football with you guys. So, looking forward to that.
Really
looking forward to putting the cap on the practices and, take that macro view and and let the talent come to me, and we'll have plenty of coverage for you tomorrow on Draft Breakdown.
Yeah, I if you guys are listening to 365, I always enjoy putting Joe on the spot at the end of every podcast, and he always gets the deer in the headlights look as, oh my God, you've put me under the gun. So
this one's live. We can't cut it out like we usually do.
We'll do it live. Yeah. Maybe we can get it for the archived version. We can cut that out. So thank you all very much for listening to 365 Draft. I am Kyle Krabs of NDT Scouting. You can get at me at NDT Scouting. I've got the syndicate relationship with draftbreakdown.com. Got a bunch of my notes going up there. All my Senior Bowl reviews are going up there as well. Or you can visit me at ndtscouting.com. I wouldn't be mad if you did. Thank you all for listening. We look forward to touching base with you all at the end of day 3.
for a second.